So as we dive into the sales order module, we're actually going to start with quotes because traditionally quotes are the precursor to a sales order. Now, simply a quote is just a list of items at a certain price that you want to show to a customer that you're offering to that customer. If you had someone come in and say, I want this particular item that I know your vendor has, but you don't have it right now, you don't have to give them a quote and then convert that to a sales order. You can just create a sales order if that customer knows, yes, I want to purchase that thing and I want it ordered right now. You can go ahead and jump to a sales order. But a lot of times what we see is you creating a quote and then converting that quote to a sales order and then that sales order to an invoice. So we're going to start with a quote. So essentially, like I said earlier, a quote is just a list of items at a particular price that you are offering to a customer. So let's see how to create that. So we go to SO, create quote. And we do need to assign this to a customer. So if that customer walks in off the street and they want a quote and you don't have a customer file for them, you need to go ahead and create one. You may be tempted to use the quote unquote cash customer here. Do not do that because then the tracking of that quote can be lost or can be jumbled up with another customer. And so it's important to use a customer, or if you don't have a customer already created for that person, to just make a new customer. It doesn't take that long and it's well worth the effort. So we're going to search for our customer and go ahead and select that. Now there are two different tabs on this form. And this first one is just the main tab here. And you can see up here at the top, it says quote. And over here, it says quote. Now, once this is converted to a sales order, really the only difference that you'll see is this won't say quote anymore. It'll actually then say sales order. So that's one thing to make a note of. And as a reminder, the big difference in a quote and sales order is when we put an item on a quote, it's just listing the item and it's not affecting our inventory in any way. When we put that item on a sales order or when we convert that quote to a sales order, those items are then allocated for and it does affect our inventory. So we'll come back to this tab and cover some things, but let's add some items to this quote. So we go to the detail tab and you may recognize this screen. It looks very much like the Ring sales screen. And just like the Ring sales screen, you can add items in all those various ways through searching, through scanning, through the use of the grid, which is what I'm going to do here. And then just as on the Ring sales screen, we can do it times 10. And now we have 10 of those items. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save this quote. If you wanted a delivery charge, if it was set up for that, you could add that here. We're going to add a $5 delivery charge. Now let's go back to that main tab and take a look at a couple things. So again, we have the sales order number. It's up here at the top. It is 207. And the sales order number, this is also the quote number. So this number doesn't change, whether it's a quote or a sales order. That's why it says sales order, and that is the number. And it does increment, and we'll look at that more here in just a second. These other categories are pretty self-explanatory, but we'll hop over them. We have the order date, that was when this was created. The terms for this customer, here's our customer information. If they have a different billing address or shipping address, we could toggle this and change that if we wanted to. We have the sales rep, if you need to keep track of that sort of thing. By default, it's going to put the person who created it, so that's the demo user in this case. If you wanted to change it, you could edit and change that. If there's a job associated to it, you could put in delivery information. You could have an expiration date for this quote if you so chose. You can see the financial information here. You can add comments, directions, etc. Down here at the bottom, you can see this is where you would print the order. Here's what the quote sheet looks like once it's printed out. Up here in the top right, we have our quote number. And one thing important to take a note of is that when we edit the quote and then save it again, this would change to a 207-A-B-C, however many times we change that. And the system keeps up with each change and has a copy of this form for every change like that that's made, so that we can show the customer and so our employees know what versions of quotes are out there and what the most current version of that quote is. That printed form we can also email if you have the email module by just simply clicking email form, filling in the information, and then hitting send. The activity button here shows any activity that's happened on this ticket. And especially here we have the example that I mentioned earlier where we edited and then resaved this quote. So there are two different versions. This is the original. The 207-A is the most recent, and then we can see that quote, and we could even reprint it here if we so chose. And across these tabs, you'll get a little bit more information if you look through here about the different activities that have occurred and what the most recent changes have been. So once we've saved the quote, we've printed it out, we've handed it to the customer, they leave, they decide if they want that to proceed with that quote or not. Let's say they come in 3 days from now and they decide, yes, we want to proceed with that quote and we're ready to turn that into a sales order. How do we find it? So we go to SO again, modify order. Now, obviously, if we knew the exact number, you can type it in here. You can search by customer ID, company, etc. But what we're going to do is we're just going to select quotes only, and we're going to hit find now, and it sorts. The most recent ones are at the bottom, so we'll just go all the way to the bottom, and there it is. In the next video, we will cover converting this quote to a sales order and talk about the differences and what that does to our inventory.